The world of video games is vast and ever-changing. We have the ability to play video games on the go or from the comfort of our own homes. We can play with anyone, anywhere, at any time. But the video gaming industry wasn't always so accessible. So how did we go from primitive computers to the world of video games we see today? My name is Tommy, and this is The Story Behind. When people talk about video games, they are typically referring to consoles made by the likes of Sony or Nintendo that are primarily made to play games like Call of Duty or Mario Kart. But these are just a couple examples of what a video game is. Home consoles like the Xbox or Nintendo Switch are technically computers, which is exactly where video games got their start. The first video games were created and played on computers back in the 40s and 50s, which were primitive compared to what we have today. Computer users quickly realized that the machines could be programmed into games. Although the first games played on these early computers were a huge draw to those who knew about them, computers weren't accessible enough to the general public for video games to really take off. Computers were generally only accessible to the military, large companies, or universities. And at one university, a student loved playing a game called Space Wars so much that he ended up creating an entire industry. Enter Nolan Bushnell. Although computer games like Space Wars were only one function of 1959's PDP-1, Nolan Bushnell took the concept of Space Wars and created machines whose only function was to game. Often referred to as the father of the video game industry, Nolan created a little company by the name of Atari. And with the help of game designer Al Alcorn, the company's first big hit game, Pong, was released in 1972. Not long after, other companies followed in Atari's success, and hundreds of other coin-operated games were made, making video game arcades the place to be throughout the 70s and 80s. While arcades were extremely popular and made lots of money, the idea of creating a way for these games to be played at home started to take hold.
Families who are content to let television do its thing often find themselves at its mercy for a choice of entertainment, while people who want television to do their thing entertain themselves with Odyssey, the electronic game of the future.
Created by Ralph Baer in 1972, the Odyssey holds the title of being the first manufactured home video game console and the first to be featured in a television commercial. The console initially sold for $100 and featured two gaming paddles as controllers and were used with overlays on the TV that would add a little razzle-dazzle to the gaming experience. Even for its time, it wasn't that great, but it was only the beginning. Other consoles entered the market and were all basically a variation of Pong. Atari saw the value of entering the home console market, so in September 1977, they introduced to the world the Atari VCS, or more commonly known as the Atari 2600.
Only Atari makes the world's most popular home video games.
The 2600 hit store shelves at an insane price of $199. The system came with two joysticks, a pair of control paddles, and introduced the concept of swappable game cartridges to a wide audience. Swappable cartridges were unfamiliar, which led to a slow start in sales, but by holiday season 1979, Atari had over 1 million units sold. And by 1980, Atari doubled sales with the first arcade-to-home console conversion game, Space Invaders.
Out here we entertain ourselves at home, so we got an Atari video game. There's so many different games to play. We especially like Space Invaders, zapping those little devils from outer space. It's fun, but personally I think the whole idea of creatures from outer space is a little far-fetched.
Before 1979, all games were developed by their respective console manufacturers, which didn't leave much room for third parties to develop games for existing consoles. That is until a company named Activision took it upon themselves to develop two hit games for the 2600, Kaboom and Pitfall.
So you think you're fast enough to beat the bomber? I don't think so.
Kaboom! By Activision.
Atari tried to block the sale of Activision cartridges, accusing them of intellectual property infringement. Activision ended up settling out of court and agreed to pay a licensing fee, making them the first official third-party video game developer. This set the stage for the relationship between third-party developers and console manufacturers that we see today. At this point, the video game industry was in full swing, and companies like Mattel and their Intellivision console began to compete with Atari's dominance over the market. Eventually, everyone got in on the act. Purina, the dog food company, distributed a game for the 2600 called Chase the Chuck Wagon, just to sell dog food. It was only available by mail. People would have to mail in proof that they purchased Purina products, and the company would send them the game. It was tactics like this that led to an oversaturation of the market, as companies and brands from every industry rushed to create games and consoles to capitalize on the popularity of video games. This fast popularity morphed into what is now known as the Great North American Video Game Crash of 1983. There were just way too many games out there, and many of them were terrible. Atari was rushing to produce games to maintain their position at the top of the food chain, and the quality of their games declined. Video game companies were competing not only with each other, but with home computers like the Apple II and the Commodore 64, which had the capabilities of not only playing video games, but also did so much more. People began to lose interest in the video game craze, and sales began to tank. It seemed like it was all over for the video game industry. That is until a little company in Japan came along and changed things. But that's a story for another day. Thanks for watching The Story Behind. We'll see you next week here at the Game Studio. Let us know in the comments the first home console game that you ever played and what were some of your favorite games. And if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you didn't, we're still going to make more videos.